I can't tell you what a thrill it is to be here today. I blather on about free enterprise and the importance of private property rights all the time back in Fort Wayne. It is so nice to have an audience, besides my dear wife, that is in agreement with me that free markets work best. It's such a welcome change from the scowls of disapproval that is so typical of the attendees of a city council meeting. My friend Aaron Tuttle approached me this summer about writing a piece related to the impact that federal grant programs have on local government. Aaron was seeing the impact through Department of Transportation funding for bus lanes in Indianapolis, where the feds were dictating fair housing mandates as a condition of transportation funding. I have written a few op-ed pieces about the distortions in local economies and governments created by the Regional Cities program implemented by the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. This program required that county governments come together and form regional development authorities. In northeastern Indiana, our RDA is comprised of 11 counties. The RDA has the power to give grants from funds it received from IEDC. This is what got the counties to jump on this. Our region got $42 million of quote-unquote free money to distribute to the projects of their choosing. Our state legislature also gave these regional development authorities the ability to borrow, lend, collect taxes, and use eminent domain. Scary stuff, if you ask me. However, it is not the stuff that Aaron asked me to write about. What I've been confronting on City Council for the last year was a weaponized Chamber of Commerce Economic Development Corporation that had a myriad of tools at its disposal. Our county has the only chimera of this sort in the state, where the Chamber of Commerce and the city and county's economic development corporations were merged into a single entity that could act as a gatekeeper to tax abatement, building permits, tax increment financing, and other economic inducements, as well as collect dues from members and lobby the city and county governments for higher taxes to pay for more economic development projects. This thing is quite a beast. It just happened that my wife and I have been watching an AMC original Netflix series called, an AMC original series on Netflix called Hell on Wheels. This semi-hysterical depiction of the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad got me thinking about the correlation between what I was seeing on council and what this show is reenacting. In the 1860s, America was at war with itself. Washington was in search of a unifying accomplishment, something to reiterate the manifest destiny of continental expansion. To accomplish this, the Union Pacific Railroad was created by Congress to construct a transcontinental railroad. The Union Pacific issued shares at par through Credit Mobilier, who then sold the shares at a loss to investors that included several members of Congress. Credit Mobilier was the sole provider of services to the Union Pacific, who in turn billed the United States government on a cost-plus overhead arrangement. In the end, the Union Pacific Railroad, a privately owned company, owned a transcontinental railroad that the taxpayers paid $100 million to Credit Mobilier to construct for $50 million. It's a 2-to-1 ratio. Congressmen resigned in shame as they had personally bilked the taxpayer while supposedly pursuing the unassailable aim of rapid coast-to-coast transit. Although Ulysses S. Grant was never indicted, his reputation and that of the Office of Presidency was permanently damaged by the evidence that he knew of the Credit Mobilier scheme and did nothing to stop it. Today we have new unassailable goods to pursue. The mantra of sustainable development has become an all-encompassing dictate of governmental departments all over the globe, including the United States Treasury Department. In the final year of the Clinton administration, Vice President Al Gore began marketing the Community Renewal Tax Relief Act of 2000. This would usher in a change in the way public housing investment would be done through public-private partnerships, driven through Treasury Department incentives to banks. The Bush administration was the first to administer the new tool to redirect tax money to local governments to the projects of their choosing. New market tax credits were awarded to the community development entities within city or county governments. $2.5 billion was distributed in the first 2 years. That was 2001 and 2002. In total, Treasury has distributed $50.5 billion as of fiscal year 2016 to the New Markets Program, ostensibly for the purpose of providing low-income housing to underserved urban areas. According to the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, that's our nation's primary banking regulator, the New Market Tax Credit Program, quote, provides a tax incentive for private sector investment into economic development projects and businesses located in low-income communities. The program is overseen by the United States Department of Treasury and is directly administered by the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund. New market tax credits are allocated by the CDFI fund to community development entities, CDEs, under a competitive application process, end quote. While this program was an instant success in more urban settings, it just wasn't catching on in rural America. Enter Richard Florida, PhD. Florida achieved fame in 2002 with the release of The Rise of the Creative Class. Dr. Florida's prescription was hefty doses of public funding on quality of place initiatives to attract and retain talent. Supposedly, small and mid-sized cities across America were losing their young, talented people to San Francisco and New York. These became the marching orders and the perfect rationale to make the most of the new market tax credits. In our town, we have seen several of these quality of place projects. A quick glance at this enhanced Google map of our downtown reveals that nearly half of the property is either owned by the government or being funded with government dollars. The green is government property, including our $75 million single-A baseball park complex, several parking garages, a $50 million convention center, $85 million library, as well as the jails, courthouses, and offices that one expects. The dark bluish purple plots are nonprofits, mostly churches and civic performing arts centers. The pink are those private properties that have received substantial public money through economic development efforts. Lastly, the red areas are those properties that are proposed to get arenas, riverfront promenades, and commercial redevelopment with government assistance. Allow me to describe to you the most egregious quality of place project that I've seen to date. It is called The Landing. This project will be the rehabilitation of a block of underutilized buildings adjacent to the parking garage for the police station and the county jail. Many years ago, it was a place where a traveler on the Wabash-Erie Canal system could find a warm brothel and a cold beer. It's not a whole lot different today. The Landing will have 72 housing units and 22 commercial units when completed, according to the developers' pro forma submitted to the various government entities they are applying for aid from. This affordable housing option will offer residential units that will rent for up to $1,100 a month, with an average of just over $900 a month. This is 50% more than the average rent in Fort Wayne. However, the commercial units will be heavily subsidized, renting for $6 per square foot, while the average commercial tenant in downtown pays over $12 per square foot. This will likely put heavy pressure on the property owners nearby. The Landing has a menagerie of financing sources, nearly all of them deriving their existence from a government program. The total capital stack, which in eco-devo parlance means funding sources, comes to $34.7 million. $10.7 million is from new market tax credits. Another $5 million comes from federal government sources by the way of $4 million in historical tax credits and $1 million in low-income housing loan from HUD. The Indiana Economic Development Corporation seed money into regional cities is accounting for $7 million. The city of Fort Wayne has found a variety of pockets to come up with $8.75 million. Finally, the developer is putting up $3.25 million in equity. The developer has achieved getting $10 of government money for every $1 they have contributed to this project that they will own. Who would ever agree to this? Well, as you can see in our next slide, this is not the way it was sold. The developer took a presentation around to the various entities showing that over 60% of the funding was being provided by private sources. For all the local and state entities, the federal funding for the new market tax credits and historic tax credits are characterized as private. The city's legacy fund characterized as a private source, despite it requiring a majority vote from city council for appropriation. The Downtown Development Trust loan is characterized as private, despite DDT being funded from the legacy fund and having the deputy mayor on its board of directors. A closer inspection of the sources and uses document enclosed in the application exposes that there really is no private capital in the project, only private ownership, as the developer gets 100% of its investment back up front as a developer's fee. Also objectionable is the fact that nearly percent of the New Market's tax credit financing is spent on the administration of the funds, nearly $2 million. Perhaps the most repugnant thing about this project is the projected valuation of the completed facilities. Taking the pro forma financial statement provided to council for evaluation of the legacy fund loan, one finds that the expected cash flows, discounted at a generous 6% discount rate, provides a market value of about $11 million. That's 1/3 of the development cost. At the end of the day, taxpayers will pay 3 times too much to construct low-income housing that will sport rents 50% above market to be owned by a firm that has zero money invested in the project. This is all being done, supposedly, in the name of attracting and retaining young people to the former red light district. 3-to-1, that's a ratio that would make the credit mobilier perpetrators blush. I think it behooves us to ask the question, as Cicero would have, cui bono, or who benefits? I see us putting on our best Columbo impersonation in doing this. The obvious beneficiary is the developer, but we must go beyond that. In order to get 7 of 9 city councilmen to vote for something like this, there has to be a broader group of beneficiaries than a developer who is based out of Cincinnati, some 150 miles away. The boosters of this project, of course, were the EDC chamber combo, the local media, and the mayor's administration. We have to peel back the onion a bit to see that the publishers of the 2 daily newspapers are on the boards of the directors of the EDC chamber combo and the Downtown Development Trust. We also see that the legal representation, architects, engineers, construction manager are all board members of the EDC chamber combo. The EDC Chamber Combo and its prominent members have a great influence on the media and campaign finance in our fair town. Those are things that councilmen care deeply about. Since the mayor's administration is the lead community development entity in our city, it has control over the New Market's tax credits once they have been allocated to the project. This buys a lot of political influence over the EDC Chamber Combo and the media. What we lose in all this is free enterprise and the concomitant innovation and efficiency that come with it. Rather than having private individuals and firms determining what is to be done with their private money, we have the United States Treasury Department using it to create political capital for the incumbents and entrench powers in local communities. The local mandarins then add to the pinch with local and state matching funds. The public is then left with their money going to private investors to overpay for projects that the market didn't find attractive at going prices. If this were a worthwhile project, was there not someone willing to pay for it with their own capital? The retort I generally get to free enterprise lectures is simply, well, what's your plan? I've already introduced my plan, published in a 2016 winter edition of the Indiana Policy Review. It's called Getting Out of the Way. I laid out a plan of simply picking the one tax that is the single biggest obstacle to business expansion and eliminating it. I've outlined the benefits and costs as well as the other steps that would need to be taken, such as halting all further governmental economic development and business inducement activity. As I was preparing for this lecture, we conservatives received something we seem to rarely get. Good news. The U.S. House of Representatives passed a tax reform bill that reduced business tax rates while eliminating one of these tax credit schemes, including the New Market tax credits. If, big if, the Senate is able to hold the line on this, it will go a long way toward restoring sanity to local governments and getting them out of the real estate development business. You have been a wonderful audience, and thank you for all you do to restore liberty to our great country.